You don't expect to see anything at a quiet church in the Cornish countryside, especially not in broad daylight, especially not with someone standing right beside you, seeing the same thing. In 1976, 2 girls walked into the grounds of Mawnan Church, an ordinary place, old but unremarkable. They weren't looking for anything, they weren't alone, and what they saw wasn't something that can be dismissed as imagination, because it didn't behave like anything natural. It didn't fly, it didn't flee, it simply watched them. And they both described it in the same way. A towering shape above the church roof, wide, unmoving wings, and a head far too large to belong to any bird. They ran. But they weren't the only ones. Others came forward, quietly, reluctantly, different people describing the same impossible figure in the same place. Tonight, we're not dealing with folklore passed down over centuries. We're dealing with something that was seen, clearly, repeatedly, and by witnesses who never wanted to be part of the story. This is the true account of the Owlman of Mawnan, and once you hear what was seen, you may not look at quiet places in the same way again. The summer of 1976 did not feel like a season that belonged to the living. It lingered, not in warmth nor in light, but in a strange suspension, as though time itself had faltered over the Cornish coast and refused to move on. The wind thinned to a breath. The sea below the cliffs near Mawnan Church stretched outward in a long, dull sheets of grey, folding silently into itself, as though something beneath it had been drawn all motion inwards and held it there. Nothing was wrong, and yet nothing felt right. It was in that stillness, on that quiet rise above the Helford, that the sighting occurred, not witnessed by a believer, not shaped by expectation, but by a girl who had no reason to doubt the world as it was, until it changed in front of her. She would later give her name as June. Only that. And even then, it was offered carefully, as though names carried weight they should not be given lightly in connection with what she had seen. Those who heard her speak would later recall the same impression, that certain details resisted being spoken aloud, that the more precisely one tried to define the moment, the less it seemed to belong to ordinary memory. She had got none there alone. Her sister, Vicky, had been with her. Together, they had walked the narrow lanes that wound towards the church, lanes pressed in by hedgerows, thick and ancient, the kind that seemed to swallow sound rather than carry it. Their footsteps had been dulled by earth and root, their voices unnecessary in a place that seemed already too aware of being observed. The church stood where it had always stood, low, weathered, unyielding. Its stones seemed less built than settled, drawn downwards into the ground over centuries until it became part of the land itself. The tower rose above without ornament, watching the valley with a stillness that felt less like silence and more like patience. The graveyard did not announce itself. It revealed itself slowly. Uneven ground, leaning stones, names worn smooth by time until they became nothing more than shapes, traces of something that had once been known and spoken, now reduced to absence. There was no deliberate sense of fear there, nothing arranged to unsettle. And yet it did not welcome them. It never had. They had gone there for no reason beyond curiosity, to look, to pass through, to stand for a moment in a place that had outlasted everything around it. That was all. It was Vicky who noticed it first, not as a form, not as a presence, but as a disruption. Something above the porch, where nothing should have been, that did not belong to stone nor sky, nor light. For a moment it seemed small, indistinctive, a trick of distance perhaps, a bird unsettled from its perch, caught at an awkward angle. That would have been enough. That would have been ordinary. But it did not move as a bird moves. It did not break into flight. It did not startle. It rose. Not lifting by air, nor driven by force. It rose with a slow, deliberate certainty, as though weight were not something gained, but something chosen. June followed her sister's gaze, and in that moment the ordinary shape of the world, quiet, familiar, unquestioned, slipped. It was there, above the roofline, unmistakable and yet impossible to define. Its form resisted recognition. The mind reached for explanation, for anything that could reduce it to something known, but nothing held. It remained between things, not fully seen, not fully understood. Wings extended outwards, but not in motion, too broad, too still, held in a way that suggested neither flight nor rest, but something close to suspension, as though the act of remaining aloft required no effort at all. And the head, that was what anchored the memory, what returned to them again and again, along after everything else had blurred. It was too large, disproportionate, unnatural. It did not reflect light, it absorbed it, dulling the space around it, as though its surface resisted being clearly perceived. There were no details to settle upon, only the persistent certainty that something was there, and that it was facing them. Eyes, not luminous, not exaggerated, but fixed, forward, aware. They did not speak. There are moments when the mind fails, not from fear, but from absence, when it cannot find the structure required to interpret what it is seeing. Words depend upon understanding, and here there was none, only the act of looking, and the growing awareness of being seen. Then, slowly it shifted, not with the abruptness of a startled creature, but with a measured, almost deliberate motion. The wings altered their position, slightly, but enough, and the form descended from the roof. Lower, closer, not enough to touch, not enough to threaten, but enough to change the distance between the observer and the observed into something shared. June would later struggle to explain what she felt in that moment. It was not panic, not even fear in the way fear is usually understood. It was recognition, a quiet, undeniable certainty that they were not meant to be there, that was something had been interrupted, that they had stepped without knowing into a place where they did not belong. They ran. The movement came suddenly, without decision. One turned, the other followed. Gravel shifted beneath their feet. The path out seem longer than before, drawn out into something unfamiliar. The hedges pressed inward, narrowing the lane, swallowing what little sound they made, as though the world itself wished to be quiet there, leaving behind them nothing, no pursuit, no movement, no sound of wings, no rush of air, no sign that anything had followed at all. And yet neither of them turned back, not then, not ever. When they spoke of it later, they spoke carefully, reluctantly, each detail given as though it might carry something with it that handled too freely. But their accounts did not change. The size, the stillness, the absence of anything that could be called natural, and always the head, too large, too fixed, too aware. Others would come forward in time, not together, not publicly. A man who had seen something rise among the trees near the same ground, a visitor who described a shape passing overhead without sound, too large to be mistaken. Another who refused all detail, offering only a single sentence, quietly, as though it should not be repeated. It was not a bird. Their stories did not align in every detail. They never do, but they returned again and again to the same place, the same church, the same silence. It would be given a name later, Owlman, a word that made it smaller, manageable, something that could be spoken without weight. But names do not explain, they only disguise the absence of explanation. The church still stands, the path still leads there, the hedges still close in as they always have, and on certain evenings, when the air settles into some unnatural stillness, there are those who pause without knowing why and look towards the roofline, not because they expect to see anything, but because something in that place suggests, quietly, persistently, that once something stood there, watching, and that, whatever it was, may never have truly left.